大家可以去扫这个码，然后扫这个码进入本活动群，然后关注这个公众号，然后看到我们后续的一个活动。Hi, Clark.
Hi.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, and we have some questions for you. In the stakeholders round, such as engineers, product managers, researchers, should I present project differently from design presentation with hiring managers?
Yeah, I think it's just if you're presenting to a different audience, should your presentation be different? I think it is good to slightly vary how you talk about each project depending on what your audience is. What I would do is know the details of what you want to say in your project. That should be consistent for each case. But for different audiences, they might care more about different aspects of your work. So as an example, if you're presenting to engineering, they might not care as much about how you made every design decision. They care more about, what is the ultimate decision you've made? How does it impact the engineering work for them? What are technical constraints and considerations? If you're presenting to designers, they care more probably about the design process, how you reached each decision, the details of the design process. And for product managers, I would emphasize more how it impacts the business. So I would emphasize more business considerations, how it would affect certain metrics around adoption, usage, things like that. So in summary, it's basically the same presentation. I don't think you need to create completely different views of each project, but just know your audience and emphasize what aspect is most relevant for them.
Especially in the on-site interview, you will have the one-on-one kind of back-to-back meetings with everyone, including all the stakeholders, including the product managers, engineers, and at the end of each session, typically the interviewers will give you some time to ask them questions. So what kind of question you think? Do you think this is very important, and what kind of questions you want to hear from the interviewees? And as a hiring manager, or as a designer, and also as an engineer product manager?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I do think it is important. Like one analogy I have for doing interviews is like dating. And so it's not just one group evaluating, another, you're evaluating each other. A red flag for me is if I'm interviewing a candidate for a position and they have no questions. I think that to me seems like they are not that curious about the position or have done any research. The things I'm looking for are, they're really trying to evaluate the actual job and what it would be like in practice. So things about, what is the work culture like? Is it a culture where they can practice a very solid design process, meaning they have time to do research, they can talk to customers, they can iterate. Things like that I think are important. It's also a good sign if I'm interviewing someone and they have done research on the company, its domain, types of problems they face in that company. If they know nothing about the job, to me, it indicates, they just in general lack of kind of discipline, interest, and focus, which would be, to me, a slight, I wouldn't say I wouldn't give someone a job because they never ask questions, but I think having a candidate research the company, know the domain, know what type of culture they're looking for would increase the chance we extend an offer to them.
Okay, and also, so not sometimes, actually, for every interview process, typically you need to do not on-site presentation, but kind of the final round. You will be given some time for a presentation for 45 minutes or 1 hour or 30 minutes. Is there any tips about preparing the presentation deck, and also about the presenting your project? So if I'm now presenting my project, should I pay some attention to some details or some tips you can give us? You can give to me.
Yeah, I think it's somewhat nerve-wracking, I think, to present work to an audience because you're being really evaluated. I think advice I would have is really know your material really well. So when people ask questions, which can be hard, or point out flaws in your work, it's clear you've really done the work, you know why you made certain decisions. So really understand the detail of the projects. And so you can speak, not have to memorize a script, but really can recall specific details, explain, why you made certain decisions, I think is very important. Some general things too, I look for when I'm interviewing people or evaluating portfolios are they excited to share what their work? Do it seem like they're really interested in what they're doing? Someone that's really bored or extremely nervous or disengaged, to me, is a warning sign of, why are they doing this to begin with if they don't care about the work they're doing? So just being, positive, speak calmly, really know the content you're talking about, I think is all really important. And I would encourage you to practice just describing your projects to other people, just to build up practice, prior to an interview that's really important to you. One other thing I would practice if possible is your projects well, and so you might assume other people know more than you think they do. And so you can kind of describe things that they might not have context or background for, which is harder for them to follow. So try to explain it in a way that a general audience could understand. They didn't have to know, every step of the process, and still understand the problems you faced, what decisions you made, why you made those decisions, I think is generally good advice no matter what company you're interviewing for.
I also received another question. So, now a lot of students, they are trying to look for interns. So I think, especially for interns, they do not have any work experience before, and maybe the expectation is different. So what kind of qualifications or design skill sets you are looking for when you interview an intern candidate compared to a full-time position?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've interviewed pretty many intern positions and been kind of a manager for intern. The things that I look for the most, and one thing that you should keep in mind when you're applying, if you're applying for an internship position, the expectation is not that you're a deep expert and that you have tons of experience. If so, you wouldn't be applying for internship positions. So have realistic expectations. I think I made this mistake when I did an internship, is I really thought, I need to work in, as a professional, be really great at this job. I was nervous, I would even find a position, or when I did, they would like me. I'm not good at doing the design work professionally. So that's not the expectation. If it were, it would be a full-time position. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing of what qualities I think people are looking for is not your current skill set, but your ability to learn, your eagerness for the job, your desire to improve and take feedback. So don't be defensive of if people criticize your work or explain where it can be improved, don't just say they're wrong or they don't understand. Really listen to the feedback, take it in, and improve in the direction they advise. I think those are really the biggest ones of eagerness to learn and be really coachable. And so you take people's feedback, you really listen to it. You don't just keep explaining why you're right or why they're wrong. Those would be really big red flags, and I think would reduce your chance of a return offer from that same company.
And I heard you said you were a manager of interns before. So when you manage an intern, how do you decide whether to give a return offer? Because all the interns, they want to get a return offer, and but you cannot give the return offer to all of them. Then how do you decide who is the winner?
Yeah. So in my specific situation, the intern I managed, I think he was very smart. He was very proactive. One thing that really impressed me, and it made it more likely that we extended a return offer. I had assigned him a project. He was working with a product manager to kind of figure out the details, do some concept testing, iteration. The product manager decided to completely change the project halfway through their summer internship. And he became really frustrated and was really unhappy with that decision. So a few days later, he wrote a long and detailed explanation to me of why he thought this was a poor decision with all his logic. And the reason I thought that was really good advice is he didn't just get mad and yell at me or like, run out of the room. He went back, he thought, very calmly, he listed out logically why he thought we should do a certain direction for the product with good logic. And to me, they indicated he was very proactive. He was a clear thinker. He didn't react emotionally, and that he was really trying to make good design decisions. And that he was brave enough to voice his concern. He didn't just say, "Oh, sure, I'll go along with this." And I think those are really great traits and good signs that he will become a very effective designer. That he can think rationally. He's not reactive, and he is brave enough to stand up for what he thinks is right for the design. So I think those were some reasons why we ended up bringing him back. And he's now been working 2 years, and he's done fantastic work. I think it was a good hire.
Okay, great. There is a question: how do we selectively choose what to present and what not to present on portfolio and the presentation deck during the interview? Sometimes I feel the storylines may seem not that clear by presenting all of them. I think by presenting all the details. Do you understand the question?
Yeah, this is something I personally struggle with. Is I know so much content and I want to explain everything. I think if you do that, though, it can become very boring, actually, because there's so much details and so much content for the audience. It's really hard for them to know, like, what is your main point? What are you trying to say to me? I'm just lost in the details. And so one thing that I would advise is, think through the projects you want to showcase in your interview or portfolio. And then from each project, what is the 1 or 2 things you really want to highlight? So maybe as an example, one project, you've done a really great research, done a lot of interviews with customers. You thought the process was very solid, and that research insight helped drive the design. So maybe emphasize that as one aspect. Or maybe another project, you thought the interaction design was really creative and really helped solve the problem successfully. So you can emphasize like those, a few big ideas, really emphasize those a lot. And then in the follow-up question and answer, you can, if people want to know more about different areas, you can describe it. But I think trying to highlight the few big things that you think really showcase your skills, your approach, your special, what you bring to the table, I think is a good way to provide focus for each project and not try to do everything at once.
So if your target users are engineers, then is there any specific tip when you present a project?
I think if you're presenting to engineers, like stepping back just generally, I think any presentation, you need to be credible to your audience, meaning, are you trustworthy and do you know what you're speaking about? So I think that's true no matter what, any audience you speak to. Just ensure that the details are right. Do your research to understand how things work. And if you're asked questions or there's areas you don't know, I personally think it's much stronger just to admit that you don't know something versus try to make up an answer on the fly. I think that often comes across to me as more junior and less mature of, admitting areas where you don't know. I think that's totally fine. As designers, we are always having to learn new areas or learn things that we don't know before. And so you're not evaluated always on, that you know the answer to everything, but that you're able to learn and have a track record of learning, new domains or new approaches or techniques, and have delivered designs successfully in those different areas. So I wouldn't get super nervous. I think this is true not just of, engineering focused products, but design is so many industries in healthcare or finance or real estate. And, most people are not born knowing the details of those areas. You need to learn them. So I would emphasize more of how you can learn these areas and how you've successfully learned domains or approaches and delivered successful designs in past projects.
And some audience, they do not have a HCI degree. So does it matter? Is it very critical? So maybe like if I have a HCI like a degree, then I will have a much bigger chance. If I do not have, then maybe my chance is pretty little. So is it critical?
I personally don't think an HCI degree is critical. I think just in the design org that I work in, I would say less than half of people have an HCI specific degree. There's a very diverse set of backgrounds, many from engineering, from architecture, from some social sciences. And so it's a pretty broad background. I think people care way more about what you can do, your portfolio of work and track record of successful design projects. I think, HCI degree is definitely not a strict requirement. It is helpful if you don't have experience that you have a degree, but if not, there's many paths to becoming a professional designer.
And especially for some people, they try to switch their career paths, but they have not done any like internships, and they have not got a HCI degree. So in their portfolio, actually most of the projects are personal projects or some like not real projects. So then, like, what do you think about that? So typically these kind of like students, like they worry about if all my projects are just personal projects, not real projects. Can I get interview? Can I get a chance to get a position, full-time job, something like that?
Yeah, I think it is more challenging if you don't have a portfolio of, real work with real clients or companies, but it is definitely not a blocker. Like we've interviewed people, I think, that just had, personal projects, had not done things professionally, and some of them we've hired. And so it isn't a blocker. It is more difficult, but you can definitely find a way to start. It might not be at a top tier company. It might be a smaller startup or a less famous company or maybe a less famous agency. But you definitely can get started without, professional experience, just with side projects. It's not a blocker, I would say.
Okay, thank you very much.